I'm Curtis, 32 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I lived with my mom to help pay bills after Dad passed away. Then my sister Heather showed up with her husband, 6 suitcases, and zero warning. "You can take the guest room, or move out," my mother told me that night. "Great if you're out by the weekend," my sister added cheerfully. I chose to leave, but their smug smiles vanished faster than I expected. Now there's panic in their eyes and desperation in their voices. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from, and hit that subscribe button if family drama makes you feel better about your own situation. Trust me, this story is going to make your family look functional by comparison. 2 years ago, I moved back in with my mom after my father died from heart disease. Dad had always been the mediator in our family, the glue that kept us together despite the obvious favoritism my mother showed toward Heather. When he passed, Mom struggled financially and emotionally. I couldn't bear watching her try to manage the mortgage on her teacher's salary, so I suggested moving back home temporarily to help out. Looking back, I realized what I thought was a temporary arrangement to support my grieving mother had become a convenient solution for her to maintain her lifestyle without making any sacrifices. Mom and I used to have a great relationship when I was younger. I was the kid who never gave her trouble, always did well in school, and helped around the house without being asked. Dad used to tell me he was proud of the man I was becoming. But as the years passed, I noticed a pattern. No matter what I accomplished, it was never quite enough for my mother. When I graduated college with honors in computer engineering, Mom's first comment was, "That's nice, but your sister is considering law school." Heather never actually went to law school. She dropped out of community college after 2 semesters to find herself, which apparently meant bouncing between retail jobs, while Mom subsidized her apartment. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks at a tech startup, building my career, and still finding time to drive the 40 minutes to Mom's house every weekend to mow the lawn and fix whatever needed repairing. 3 years ago, Heather met Trevor at some corporate networking event. He swept her off her feet with stories about his investment management career and the luxury lifestyle he could provide. Mom was instantly smitten with him too. "Such a motivated young man," she would say. "He knows exactly where he's going in life." This was usually followed by pointed questions about my dating life and comments like, "When are you going to find someone and settle down like your sister?" The first time I met Trevor, something felt off. He had that slick, rehearsed quality of someone who spent too much time perfecting their personal sales pitch. Every conversation somehow turned to his latest deal or acquisition. He drove a car he clearly couldn't afford, and wore watches that I later learned were high-quality counterfeits. But he knew exactly how to charm my mother, bringing her expensive flowers and taking her to fancy restaurants whenever they visited. Meanwhile, I was contributing nearly $2,000 monthly toward the mortgage, utilities, and groceries. I paid for a new water heater when the old one broke, replaced the aging roof that had started leaking, and even funded the kitchen renovation Mom had wanted for years, all while trying to pay down my student loans and build some savings. Yet somehow my contributions became expected invisible, while Trevor was praised for bringing a $30 bouquet once every few months. "Your sister and Trevor are building a real future together," Mom would say. "You need to think about settling down too, Curtis. You're not getting any younger." What she never acknowledged was that my sacrifice was allowing her to maintain her home and lifestyle. Dad had left some life insurance, but not enough to cover the remaining mortgage. Without my financial support, she would have had to downsize significantly. But that reality was never discussed. Instead, I was made to feel like the underachiever, despite being the only one actually supporting our family. I tried dating during this period, but it's hard to build a relationship when you're sharing a house with your mother and working constantly to support 2 people. The few women I did bring home were subjected to uncomfortable comparisons with Heather and interrogations about their career prospects and family plans. After the 3rd potential girlfriend was reduced to tears by my mother's not-so-subtle questioning, I stopped bringing anyone home. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs, the constant undermining of my accomplishments, the way Heather would call only when she needed money, or help, then disappear until the next crisis. The fact that Trevor would spend hours talking about his business success but became evasive when I asked specific questions. But I was so focused on being the good son, on honoring what I thought my father would have wanted, that I ignored the red flags waving right in front of me. And then came that Friday evening that changed everything. I remember that Friday vividly. I'd had an especially grueling week at work debugging a critical system that had crashed and cost the company thousands in downtime. My boss had praised my dedication, even hinting at a potential promotion, but all I wanted was to collapse on my couch, order pizza, and maybe watch a game before sleeping for 12 straight hours. As I turned onto our street, I noticed an unfamiliar luxury SUV parked in the driveway, forcing me to park on the street. Annoying but not unusual, Mom occasionally hosted her book club or teacher friends. What was unusual was the mountain of expensive luggage piled in the entryway as I opened the front door. "Curtis, there you are." My mother's voice carried from the kitchen, sounding oddly high-pitched and nervous. "Come say hello." I followed her voice to find Heather and Trevor sitting at our kitchen table like they belonged there, drinking Dad's special occasion whiskey that I'd been saving. Heather jumped up to give me a performative hug that barely made contact before retreating to Trevor's side. "Surprise," she said, flashing that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "We decided we needed some family time." "Family time," I echoed, looking pointedly at the 6 large suitcases I'd counted in the hallway. "How long are you planning to stay?" My mother jumped in before Heather could answer. "They're going to be with us for a while. Isn't that wonderful? The whole family together again." Trevor raised Dad's whiskey glass in a mock toast. "Your mother's been kind enough to offer us accommodation while we take a little break from the city hustle. Business has been crazy, man. Sometimes you need to step back, recharge with family, you know." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. I looked at Heather, who was suddenly very interested in her manicure. So I said slowly, "Where will they be staying?" Our 3-bedroom house was modest. Mom had the master bedroom, I had my childhood room, and the 3rd bedroom had been converted into a small home office where I often worked, remotely. My mother's expression shifted to something between embarrassment and determination. "Well, that's something we need to discuss. Heather and Trevor will need proper space as a married couple." "We'll take your room," Heather interrupted. "Mom's converting the office back to a guest room, but it's too small for 2 people and all our things." I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. "And where exactly am I supposed to sleep?" "You can take the guest room," my mother said, not meeting my eyes. "It's cozy." Cozy was a generous description for a room barely 9 feet square with no windows and a closet the size of a microwave. The bed was an ancient pull-out sofa that Dad had bought from a garage sale 15 years ago. Or my mother continued when I didn't immediately respond, "If that doesn't work for you, you might consider finding your own place. You've been talking about moving out eventually anyway." The casual way she suggested I vacate the house I'd been helping pay for and maintain hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Heather, who was watching the exchange with barely concealed satisfaction. "It might be for the best," she added. "You're 32, Curtis. Don't you think it's time you stopped living with Mommy?" The condescension in her voice made my blood boil, especially considering she was the one who'd shown up unannounced, expecting to be accommodated. "I live here because I've been helping Mom financially since Dad died," I said evenly. "Something you might know if you called more than twice a year." Trevor chuckled, swirling the whiskey I'd been saving for a special occasion. "No shame in the game, man. Not everyone can hack it in the real world right away. Some people need a little more runway before they take off." I bit back a retort, knowing it would only make things worse. "How long are you planning to stay?" I asked instead. Heather and Trevor exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Just a few months," Heather said airily, "until things settle down with Trevor's business. The market's been volatile." "A few months," I repeated. "And you didn't think to call ahead? Ask if that works for everyone living here?" My mother gave me her disappointed look, the one that always made me feel 8 years old again. "Curtis, they're family. We don't turn family away when they need support." "Funny," I said, feeling something inside me shift. "I don't remember that rule applying when I needed support." "Don't be dramatic," Heather scoffed. "Moving home to save money isn't the same as what we're going through." I wanted to ask exactly what they were going through that required such urgent family support, but my mother cut the conversation short. It's been decided, she said firmly. Either make peace with the new arrangements or consider other options. As I stood there in the kitchen my father had built looking at these people who were supposed to be my family, I realized with perfect clarity that I was the only one who saw our relationship as reciprocal. To them, I was simply a resource to be used or discarded as convenient. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow, I said quietly. Great if you're out by the weekend, Heather added cheerfully, as if she hadn't just participated in effectively evicting me from my home. We have some friends coming over next Friday, and it would be so much easier without the awkward sleeping arrangements. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that leaving was the right decision. What I didn't know was how quickly they would come to regret pushing me away. The next morning I woke early, hoping to talk to my mother alone before Heather and Trevor emerged. I found her in the kitchen making a more elaborate breakfast than she'd prepared in months. Fresh coffee, pancakes, sliced fruit arranged artfully on serving plates. "Mom, can we talk about what happened last night?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She barely looked up from the stove. "There's nothing to discuss, Curtis. Heather and Trevor need our support right now. And I don't. I've been supporting this household for 2 years. I pay half the mortgage, more than half the utilities. I bought groceries last week. Doesn't that count for anything?" My mother's spatula clattered against the pan. "Is that what this is about, money? You've been keeping score." "It's not about keeping score," I said, frustration mounting. "It's about reciprocity, respect. I rearranged my entire life to help you after Dad died. And now I'm being tossed aside because Heather shows up unannounced." "Lower your voice," my mother hissed. "You'll wake them. And for your information, what you contribute is what any child should do for their parent. It's not some special favor you're doing me." I stared at her, genuinely shocked. So my financial contributions are just expected filial duty, but when I need basic consideration, suddenly family obligation doesn't apply. "You're being selfish," she said. "Your sister is married. They need proper accommodations. Then maybe they should have called ahead, or gotten a hotel until we could figure something out together. Or I don't know, asked instead of announced. Not everyone plans every detail like you do, Curtis. Spontaneity isn't a character flaw. Consideration isn't either, I countered. "What's going on?" Heather appeared in the doorway wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She made a show of yawning delicately. "Are you two fighting?" "Curtis is upset about the sleeping arrangements," my mother said, immediately softening her tone. Seriously, Heather rolled her eyes. "It's just a room, Curtis. Don't be such a baby." "It's not just a room," I said. "It's my home. One I contribute significantly to maintaining." "Here we go with the money thing again," Heather sighed dramatically. "Just because you chip in on bills doesn't make you the king of the castle." "Chip in," I repeated incredulously. "I've paid over $40,000 toward the mortgage in the past 2 years. I replaced the roof. I fixed the plumbing. I've essentially been keeping this house functional while you've been visiting twice a year for holidays." "Not everyone measures love in dollars and cents," Heather snapped. "Some of us actually provide emotional support rather than just throwing money around and expecting gratitude." Trevor appeared behind her, already dressed in designer casual wear that seemed excessive for a Saturday morning at home. "Problem?" he asked, placing a possessive hand on Heather's shoulder. "Curtis is having a meltdown because we're taking his room," Heather said. "Ah, territory issues. Classic." Trevor nodded as if he were a psychologist diagnosing a textbook case. "Look, man, I get it. Change is hard, especially when you've been in a comfortable situation for so long. But sometimes we all need to adapt, right? Survival of the fittest and all that." "This isn't about adapting," I said, trying to keep my temper in check. "This is about basic courtesy and respect." "Respect is earned," Trevor said, his tone suddenly harder. "And from what Heather tells me, you've been coasting in a cushy arrangement here. Time to spread those wings, buddy." Cushy? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I work 50 to 60 hours a week. I maintain this house. I support Mom financially. What exactly about that seems cushy to you?" Trevor shrugged. "Living at home in your 30s while some of us are out there building real businesses, real wealth. Different definitions of success, I guess." I looked from Trevor's smug face to Heather's dismissive expression to my mother's averted eyes. Something inside me broke in that moment, not dramatically but quietly, like a thread that had been pulling tighter and tighter, finally giving way. You know what? You're right. It is time for me to move out. I pushed back from the table. I'll be gone by tomorrow night. Curtis, don't be hasty, my mother began, but her protest sounded hollow. No, this is good, Heather interjected. A fresh start for everyone. And like I said, great if you're out by the weekend. We're having some business associates over on Friday. Business associates, I questioned. I thought you were here for family time and to escape work pressure. It's complicated, Trevor said smoothly. Certain connections need to be maintained even during downtime. You'll understand when you reach this level in your career. The condescension was the final straw. I'll start packing now, I said, turning to leave the kitchen. And I'll be taking the furniture I paid for. Now wait just a minute, my mother protested. You can't just take furniture from the family home. Watch me, I replied, a calm certainty settling over me. I have receipts for everything I've purchased. The sectional in the living room, the dining table, the new refrigerator, the washer and dryer, all bought with my money when the old ones broke down. The sudden panic on my mother's face might have been comical in another context, but we need those things. So do I said simply, for my new place. You're being vindictive, Heather accused. No, I'm being practical. If I'm setting up a new household on short notice, I need furniture. And since I paid for these items, they're legally mine. We can discuss this like adults, my mother said, her tone shifting to placating. Maybe you could leave some things and take others. I'll leave everything you purchased, I offered reasonably, and take only what I paid for. The three of them exchanged uncomfortable glances, suddenly aware of just how much of the household I had been financing. This isn't how family treats each other, my mother said, quietly. I looked at her for a long moment. No, it isn't. Remember that the next time you decide to kick someone out of their home without discussion. As I walked upstairs to begin packing, I heard Heather's angry whisper. Now look what you've done. How are we supposed to entertain without decent furniture? In that moment, I knew I was making the right decision, painful as it was. Sometimes the only way to be valued is to remove yourself from the equation and let people feel your absence. The universe works in mysterious ways. The morning after that explosive confrontation, I called Ryan, a coworker I'd become friends with, to vent and ask if he knew of any available rentals. As luck would have it, the tenant in the apartment above his had just given notice, and the landlord was looking to fill it quickly. It's nothing fancy, Ryan warned when he showed me the place that afternoon. But it's clean, the building's secure, and the rent is reasonable for the area. The apartment was a modest, one-bedroom, with decent natural light, a small balcony overlooking a quiet street, and most importantly, it was available immediately. The landlord, impressed by my credit score and steady employment history, offered to let me move in the next day if I could provide the security deposit and first month's rent up front. I signed the lease on the spot. When I returned home to continue packing, I found Frank, our 70-year-old neighbor and my dad's best friend, waiting on the porch. Your mother called me, he said without preamble. Seems there's a situation brewing. Frank had been like a second father to me, especially since Dad passed. He was the only one who regularly acknowledged my contributions to the household, often stopping by to help when I was doing repairs or just to share a beer and stories about my father. They're kicking me out, I said simply. Heather and her husband showed up unannounced, and suddenly I'm inconvenient. Frank's weathered face darkened. That doesn't sound like the Laura I've known for 30 years. People change. I shrugged, not wanting to speak ill of my mother despite everything. Or show their true colors, Frank muttered. Your dad always worried about her favoritism toward Heather. Said it would cause problems someday. This was news to me. Dad never mentioned that to me. He wouldn't have. He loved your mother too much to criticize her openly, especially to her children, but he saw it. Frank shook his head sadly. So what's your plan? I told him about the apartment, and he immediately offered his truck and help with moving. I may be old, but I can still lift a box or two, he insisted. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of packing, renting a small moving truck, and transporting my belongings to the new apartment. My mother made a few weak attempts to convince me to leave certain furniture items. The dining table was always meant to be a family heirloom, but backed down when I produced receipts showing I'd purchased it just 6 months earlier. Heather alternated between cold silence and passive-aggressive comments about overreactions and drama. Trevor mostly stayed out of the way, except for one moment when he caught me alone and said, "Smart move, actually. Independence suits a man. No hard feelings, right?" I didn't bother responding. There were definitely hard feelings, and his attempt at casual reconciliation only made them worse. Frank was invaluable during the move, not just for the physical help but for his steady presence and occasional words of wisdom. "Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into," he told me as we assembled my bed in the new apartment. "Your father would be proud of you standing up for yourself." Once the move was complete, I sent my mother a formal text informing her I would no longer be contributing to the household expenses. Her response was immediate. "I never expected you to leave completely. We need to discuss the financial arrangements." I didn't reply. There was nothing to discuss. I had my own place now, my own bills to pay. The mortgage she had insisted was my filial duty was now solely her problem. The first few nights in my new apartment were strange, both liberating and lonely. I had forgotten what it felt like to have complete privacy, to not worry about someone questioning my comings and goings or judging my choices. I could leave dishes in the sink if I wanted, stay up late without concern about disturbing others, invite friends over without advance warning. I used the sudden freedom to reconnect with friends I'd neglected while juggling work and family responsibilities. I joined a local rock climbing gym, something I'd wanted to do for years but never had time for. I started cooking real meals instead of the quick sandwiches I'd gotten used to eating between work and house repairs. At work, I found myself more focused, less distracted by texts from my mother about broken appliances or household needs. My manager noticed the change, commenting on my increased productivity and asking if I'd be interested in leading an upcoming project. About a week after the move, Jessica from the UX design team caught me in the break room. We'd collaborated on several projects and had a friendly rapport, but I'd always been too busy with family obligations to pursue anything more. "I heard you moved," she said, stirring her coffee. "New place treating you well?" "It is," I replied, surprised she knew about my situation, just getting used to having my own space again. "Ryan mentioned you're in his building now. That's a nice area." She hesitated, then added, "A bunch of us are going to that new gastropub on Friday after work. You should join us." For the first time in years, I didn't have to mentally check if my mother needed anything or if there were house repairs waiting. "I'd like that," I said, feeling a long dormant part of myself awakening. Friday night with Jessica and the others turned into Saturday brunch, which turned into a museum visit, which somehow became dinner at my new place. For the first time since my father died, I felt like I was living my own life rather than just maintaining someone else's. My mother continued to text occasionally, usually veiled requests for financial help disguised as updates. "The water bill is much higher now for some reason," or "the lawn service wants twice what we were paying before." I responded politely but firmly that I had my own expenses now and couldn't contribute to 2 households. 3 weeks into my new life, I had established a routine that felt both productive and genuinely satisfying. My apartment was fully furnished and organized. Jessica and I were cautiously exploring what seemed to be developing into more than friendship. Work was going well, with the promotion now officially on the table. Then Frank called, his normally steady voice uncharacteristically tense. "Curtis, I think you should know there's something not right happening at your mother's house." And just like that, my carefully constructed new reality began to crack. "What do you mean, not right?" I asked Frank, feeling my stomach knot despite my determination to stay detached from my family's drama. "There've been arguments," Frank explained. "Loud ones late at night. Heather crying, Trevor shouting, your mother trying to calm them down." This wasn't particularly surprising given the personalities involved, but Frank's next revelation was, "And there've been visitors. Men in expensive suits who don't look friendly. They come asking for Trevor, looking agitated. Last time, one of them pounded on the door for nearly 10 minutes before leaving." "Did you talk to my mother about it?" Tried to Frank's side. She brushed me off, said it was just business associates and everything was fine. But Curtis, I've been around long enough to know the difference between business meetings and something more concerning. I thanked Frank for the information but decided it wasn't my problem. They had made their choice clear when they pushed me out. Whatever was happening now was their responsibility to handle. 2 days later, that resolution was tested when I ran into Michael Chen at the coffee shop near my office. Michael and I had worked together briefly at my previous company before he moved to a position at a major financial firm. We weren't close friends, but we maintained friendly professional contact. "Curtis, long time no see," he greeted me warmly. As we waited for our orders, we exchanged the usual catch-up questions about work and life. My sister and her husband moved in with my mom recently. I mentioned casually when he asked about family, pretty much kicked me out in the process. Michael's expression shifted. "Your sister. She's married to someone in finance, right? You mentioned him at the holiday party last year." "Trevor Hamilton," I confirmed. "Investment manager, or so he claims. Always talking about his big deals and wealthy clients." The color drained from Michael's face. "Trevor Hamilton. About 6 foot, always wears those pretentious cufflinks, talks like he's giving a TED talk, even in casual conversation." The description was uncomfortably accurate. "You know him." Michael glanced around the coffee shop before leaning closer. "Curtis, I need to tell you something, but it has to stay between us. Trevor Hamilton is under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission, has been for months." My coffee suddenly tasted like acid. Investigation for what? Suspicion of running a Ponzi scheme. He's been taking investment money from clients, promising ridiculous returns, but it's all smoke and mirrors. He uses new investor funds to pay returns to earlier investors while skimming plenty off the top for himself. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. The sudden arrival at my mother's house. The need for family time away from work pressure. The mysterious business associates visiting the house. "How do you know this?" I asked, hoping desperately that Michael was mistaken. "My department works closely with regulatory compliance. We've been helping with the investigation because some of our clients were approached by him." Michael's expression was grim. "The net is closing in, Curtis. When it does, anyone associated with him could face serious questions, especially if they've been helping him in any way." "My mother and sister wouldn't knowingly participate in fraud," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced of Heather's innocence. "Maybe not knowingly," Michael agreed, "but if he's been using their names on documents or running money through their accounts. Look, I shouldn't be telling you this at all, but as a friend, I thought you should know what your family might be mixed up in." I spent the rest of the day distracted mulling over this information. It explained so much. The lavish lifestyle Trevor and Heather had been living despite her sporadic employment history, the sudden need to take a break from the city, the mysterious visitors Frank had mentioned. That evening I called my mother, deciding a direct approach was best. "Mom, I need to ask you something important. Has Trevor asked you to sign any financial documents recently, or move money between accounts?" "What? No, of course not," she replied, though her voice hitched slightly in a way I recognized from childhood, the same tone she used when claiming she hadn't had time to look at my report card, while Heather's was prominently displayed on the refrigerator. "Mom, I have reason to believe Trevor might be involved in something illegal, financial fraud. If you or Heather have been helping him even unknowingly, you could be in serious trouble." "That's ridiculous," she scoffed. "Trevor is a very successful businessman. Just because you're jealous of his accomplishments doesn't mean you can make wild accusations." "I'm not jealous, I'm concerned. Has he asked to use your address for business mail? Has he had you deposit checks or move money?" "I don't have to listen to this," my mother snapped. "This is exactly why Trevor said you left, because you couldn't stand seeing your sister happy and successful while you're still struggling." The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with my mother hanging up, after telling me not to call again, unless I was ready to apologize for slandering Trevor. I sat in my quiet apartment, torn between anger at being dismissed and genuine worry for my family. Despite everything, I didn't want them to face legal consequences for Trevor's actions. But what could I do if they refused to listen? Jessica found me still brooding when she came over later that evening. You look like someone who's carrying the weight of the world, she observed, settling beside me on the couch. Want to talk about it? I found myself telling her everything. The family dynamics, the sudden eviction, and now the disturbing information about Trevor. So even though they treated you terribly, you're worried about them, she summarized when I finished. That says a lot about your character, Curtis. Or about my inability to let go, I said, ruefully. It's not about letting go. It's about doing the right thing even when people don't deserve your consideration. Jessica squeezed my hand. So what are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. They won't listen to me. My mother thinks I'm just jealous, and Heather will believe whatever Trevor tells her. Then maybe you need more concrete evidence before approaching them again, Jessica suggested. Something they can't dismiss so easily. It was sound advice, but gathering evidence about a potential financial criminal without alerting him seemed beyond my capabilities. Still, the seed of an idea had been planted. If I couldn't convince them with words alone, perhaps I needed something more substantial. Little did I know that the decision would soon be taken out of my hands in the most unexpected way possible. 3 days after my conversation with Michael, I was finishing dinner when my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Opening the door revealed the last person I expected to see. Heather, makeup streaked from crying, hair disheveled, looking nothing like her usually polished self. "Can I come in?" she asked in a small voice I barely recognized. I stepped aside wordlessly, watching as she entered, and stood awkwardly in the center of my living room, taking in the furniture she had so casually dismissed when it was in our mother's house. "Nice place," she commented, clearly stalling. "What do you want, Heather?" I wasn't in the mood for small talk. She sank onto my couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "You were right about Trevor." Those 5 words hung in the air between us, loaded with implications. Right about what exactly? I pressed, needing her to spell it out. "Everything." Her voice cracked. "He's been lying to all of us. His investment business. It's not real. Or rather, it's not legitimate." I sat across from her, keeping my expression neutral. "How did you find out?" "2 FBI agents came to Mom's house this morning," she said, fresh tears welling. "They were looking for Trevor. When they couldn't find him, they started asking questions, showing documents, emails." She looked up at me, genuine fear in her eyes. "Curtis, he used Mom's retirement savings, all of it. And my name is on some of the paperwork. They think I was helping him." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. "Were you?" "No," she protested. "I signed things when he asked, but he said they were just formalities for tax purposes. I never thought. I never imagined he would." She broke down completely. I let her cry for a moment, before asking the obvious question. "Where is Trevor now?" "I don't know," she admitted. "He left yesterday saying he had meetings in the city. He hasn't answered any of my calls since the agents showed up." A fresh wave of panic crossed her face. "Curtis, I think he's running, and he's left me to deal with all of this." The full picture was emerging now, and it was even worse than I'd feared. "How much of Mom's money did he take?" Heather's answer made my blood run cold. "All of her retirement savings. $420,000. He convinced her it was a special investment opportunity just for family. Promised to double it within a year." Jesus, Heather. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to process the magnitude of the disaster. "Why didn't you tell me the truth when you first showed up at Mom's, that you were hiding from investors, not taking a break from work pressure?" Her shoulders slumped. "Trevor said we needed somewhere quiet to regroup. Somewhere his associates wouldn't think to look while he sorted things out." She looked up, guilt written across her face. "He said having you there would complicate things, that you asked too many questions. That's why we needed you gone." The calculated cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't just wanted my room, they had specifically wanted me out of the picture because I might expose Trevor's scheme. "Does Mom know everything now?" Heather nodded miserably. "The agents explained it all. She's not doing well, Curtis. She keeps saying she's ruined, that she'll have to work until she dies." Part of me wanted to point out that my mother had brought this on herself, by trusting Trevor blindly while pushing me away, but seeing Heather's genuine distress dampened my urge for recriminations. "What do you need from me?" I asked instead. "I don't know," she admitted. I didn't know where else to go. Mom's falling apart, the FBI is probably going to arrest me, and Trevor's abandoned me. You're the only family I have left who might still help." The irony wasn't lost on me. After dismissing my contributions and treating me as disposable, they now needed me more than ever. I could have refused, could have told Heather she had made her bed, and now had to lie in it. A part of me wanted to. But Jessica's words came back to me. It's about doing the right thing, even when people don't deserve your consideration. "I'll call Michael," I decided. "He works in finance and knows about the investigation. He might be able to help clarify your options." Relief flooded Heather's face. "You do that after everything." "You're still my sister," I said simply, "and Mom's still my mother despite everything. I don't want to see either of you in prison." While Heather composed herself in the bathroom, I called Michael, who confirmed what I already suspected: the situation was dire. But if Heather could prove she wasn't knowingly participating in the fraud, she might avoid the worst consequences. He agreed to make some calls to former colleagues who specialized in financial crime defense. Next, I called Jessica, briefly explaining the situation and asking if she'd mind postponing our plans for the evening. Not only did she understand, she offered to come over and help however she could. "We should go to Mom's," I told Heather when I hung up. "If Trevor comes back or if those business associates show up looking for him, she shouldn't be alone." We arrived at my mother's house 30 minutes later to find her sitting shell-shocked at the kitchen table, surrounded by financial documents the FBI had left behind. "Curtis," she said when she saw me, her voice hollow, "I'm so sorry. You tried to warn me." I set aside my complicated feelings and focused on the practical steps we needed to take. "Mom, we need to know exactly what Trevor had access to. Bank accounts, credit cards, property deeds, everything." With Jessica's help, we spent the next few hours creating an inventory of the financial damage. The picture that emerged was grim. Beyond the retirement savings, Trevor had opened credit lines in both my mother's and Heather's names, maxed them out, and even taken a second mortgage on the house using forged signatures. He said the papers were for a joint investment account. My mother kept repeating, as if trying to convince herself she couldn't have been so thoroughly deceived. Around 11 that night, as we were still sorting through the mess, headlights swept across the living room window. A moment later, the front door opened, and Trevor walked in, freezing when he saw all of us gathered around the dining table I had nearly taken with me. "Family meeting?" he asked, attempting his usual charm despite the obvious tension in the room. "Heather, baby, I've been calling you. What's going on?" "The FBI came looking for you," I said before Heather could respond. "They've explained your little investment scheme to Mom and Heather." Trevor's expression flickered just for an instant before resetting to concerned confusion. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding. My business dealings are completely legitimate." "Save it," Heather said, finding her voice. "They showed us the evidence, the fake accounts, the shell companies, everything." "Whatever they showed you is being taken out of context," Trevor insisted, glancing toward the door as if calculating an escape route. "This is just a regulatory misunderstanding that my lawyers will clear up." "Is that why you've been moving Mom's retirement savings through offshore accounts?" I asked, referring to details Michael had shared. "For regulatory purposes." Trevor's charm evaporated, replaced by cold calculation. "You know nothing about high-level finance, Curtis. This is exactly why I told Heather we needed privacy to handle business matters without amateur interference." "Amateur interference," I repeated, feeling a surge of anger. "Is that what you call exposing fraud?" "Fraud is such an ugly word," Trevor said dismissively. "I prefer creative finance. And yes, things got complicated, but I was handling it until you started meddling." "Handling it by stealing from my mother and sister. They invested willingly." Trevor snapped, dropping all pretense. "No one forced Laura to hand over her retirement fund. No one put a gun to Heather's head to make her sign those documents. They wanted the returns I promised, and they didn't ask questions about how I would deliver them. That's on them, not me." My mother gasped at his callousness. Even Heather seemed shocked by how quickly his loving husband facade had crumbled. "And now what?" I asked. "You're running away, leaving them to face the consequences." "Business necessity," Trevor said coldly. "Sometimes you have to cut losses to preserve capital. I came back for the emergency cash and passports I left in the safe. I didn't expect a welcoming committee." "The FBI took everything from the safe," my mother said quietly. "They had a warrant." Trevor's composure finally cracked. "They what? Everything? The cash, the documents?" Real panic crossed his face for the first time. "Everything," Heather confirmed. "It's over, Trevor." "No," he hissed, suddenly looking desperate. "No, it's not over. I have contingency plans. Other accounts they don't know about. I just need to access them before they freeze everything." He turned to Heather, his voice taking on a wheedling quality. "Baby, remember that account we set up in the Caymans? The one in your grandmother's maiden name? I need you to come with me just for a few days to access those funds. Then we can disappear, start fresh somewhere new." The naked calculation in his voice, the absolute lack of genuine feeling for my sister, as he tried to use her as a tool for his escape, filled me with cold fury. I had been recording the entire conversation on my phone from the moment he entered, initially planning to gather evidence to help Heather prove she wasn't a knowing accomplice. Now I had captured something far more damning. "It's too late for that," I said, holding up my phone so he could see the recording in progress. "You just admitted to the fraud, to fleeing prosecution, and to having hidden accounts. I'm sure the FBI will find this very interesting." Trevor lunged toward me, but Jessica, who had positioned herself near the kitchen doorway, was faster. She pressed the panic button on the alarm system I had installed for my mother last year, another contribution that had gone unacknowledged, sending an immediate alert to the police. "He's lying," Trevor said, desperately turning to my mother and Heather. "Tell him he's lying. I never admitted to anything. It's all a misunderstanding." But the mask had fallen completely now, and even my mother, who had been so easily charmed before, could see the truth. "I think you should leave, Trevor," she said quietly. "The police will be here soon." Trevor looked from face to face, seeing no allies, no escape routes. His shoulders slumped in defeat just as sirens became audible in the distance. "This isn't over," he warned. But the threat sounded hollow, the last gasp of a man who knew he had lost everything. As the police lights painted the walls with blue and red, I found myself standing between my mother and sister, a position that felt both foreign and strangely right. For the first time in years, they were looking to me not for financial support or practical assistance, but for protection and guidance. The family dynamics had irrevocably shifted, and we all knew it. The weeks following Trevor's arrest were chaotic, filled with FBI interviews, meetings with attorneys, and the grim task of assessing the financial devastation he had left in his wake. The charges against him were substantial wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and investment fraud, among others. His bail was set so high that he remained in custody, unable to continue his escape plans. Thanks to the recorded confession and their cooperation with authorities, both my mother and Heather avoided criminal charges, though they still faced the daunting prospect of financial recovery. The retirement savings were gone. Most of the credit card debt would stand. And while they might eventually recover some money through restitution, the legal process would take years. "I don't know what I'm going to do," my mother confessed one evening as we sat at her kitchen table reviewing her finances for what felt like the 100th time, at my age, starting over financially. "It seems impossible." There was a vulnerability in her voice I hadn't heard before, a recognition that the comfortable retirement she had planned was now a distant dream. The security she had taken for granted, and that I had helped maintain before being pushed aside, had evaporated. "We'll figure it out," I promised, though I wasn't entirely sure how. "You're not alone in this." My mother reached across the table to grasp my hand, her eyes filled with tears. "I treated you terribly, Curtis. I let Heather and Trevor push you out of your own home. I dismissed everything you've done for me these past 2 years. And still you came back to help. Why?" It was a fair question, one I had asked myself repeatedly, in the dark hours of the night. Why had I returned to help the people who had discarded me so easily? "Because it was the right thing to do," I said simply. And because despite everything you're still my family. I don't deserve that kind of loyalty, she admitted. Maybe not, I agreed. But relationships aren't always about what people deserve. Sometimes they're about what people need, and right now, you need support. The conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. For the first time, my mother seemed to see me clearly, not as the less favored child or the convenient source of financial support, but as the person I had grown to be with strengths and values worth acknowledging. Heather's transformation was even more pronounced. The collapse of her marriage and the public humiliation of Trevor's arrest seemed to have stripped away the entitled attitude she had cultivated for so long. She found a job as an administrative assistant, modest compared to the lifestyle she had enjoyed with Trevor, but stable and legitimate. I never really knew what Trevor did. She confessed one day, as I helped her move into a small apartment she could afford on her new salary. I didn't ask questions because I was afraid of looking stupid and because I liked the benefits too much to risk them. That's how con men operate, I told her. They count on people not asking questions. You asked questions, she pointed out. From the beginning, you seemed to sense something was off about him. I didn't want to be right, I assured her. I would have preferred for him to be exactly what he claimed to be for your sake. Heather paused in unpacking a box, looking at me with newfound respect. I've been a terrible sister to you, Curtis. All these years I've been jealous of how together your life is, how steady and responsible you are. Instead of learning from you, I resented you for making me look bad in comparison. The admission surprised me. You were jealous of me. I always thought Mom favored you. She did, Heather acknowledged. But I think deep down she respected you more. She just didn't know how to show it. And I resented that too. That even though I got more attention, you still somehow had her respect. These conversations with my mother and sister didn't erase the past hurts, but they created space for a new kind of relationship, one based on honesty and mutual respect, rather than obligation and expectation. Frank became an unexpected pillar of support for all of us during this period. His steady presence and practical wisdom helped my mother navigate the emotional aftermath of betrayal, and he often reminded us of my father's belief in family resilience. John always said the Reeves family could weather any storm. If they faced it together, he would say. He'd be proud to see you three supporting each other now. As for me, I maintained my independent life in my apartment, continuing to build my career and relationship with Jessica, who had proven herself extraordinary through the entire ordeal. Far from being scared off by my family drama, she had rolled up her sleeves and jumped in to help, demonstrating a compassion and strength that made me fall for her even more deeply. Most women would run screaming from this much family chaos, I told her one night as we relaxed on my balcony watching the sunset. I'm not most women, she replied with a smile. And honestly, seeing how you handled everything, putting aside your justified anger to help your family when they needed you, that told me everything I needed to know about your character. 6 months after Trevor's arrest, life had found a new rhythm. My mother had taken a part-time job to supplement her remaining savings and was living more modestly but sustainably. Heather had been promoted at work and was slowly rebuilding her credit. I had accepted the promotion at my company and was mentoring a team of junior engineers. We gathered for dinner once a week, sometimes at my place, sometimes at my mother's occasionally, at a restaurant when we had something to celebrate. These weren't the tense, performance-driven family meals of the past, but genuine opportunities to connect and support each other. During one such dinner, my mother raised her glass in a toast. To Curtis, she said, her voice steady but emotional, who taught me that true family strength isn't about appearances or status, but about being there for each other when it really matters. Heather added her own toast, to second chances and hard lessons, and to building something real even if it's simpler than what we thought we wanted. As I looked around at these imperfect healing relationships, I realized the profound truth that had emerged from all the pain. Family isn't defined by obligation or blood alone, but by mutual respect and the willingness to see each other as we truly are, flaws, strengths, and all. The relationships worth having are those where people value you for yourself, not for what you can provide or how you make them look. The greatest freedom I had found wasn't in leaving home or establishing independence, but in setting boundaries that allowed me to give from choice rather than obligation. By walking away when I was taken for granted, I had paradoxically created the possibility for authentic connection when I chose to return on my own terms. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved in order to be valued properly? Or have you stood by family despite being treated unfairly? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest family decisions teach us the most important lessons about self-respect and genuine connection. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And remember, sometimes the family that truly appreciates you isn't the one you're born into, but the one you build through mutual respect and understanding. Thank you for listening, and may your own boundaries always be respected.